Hello and welcome to the Deep NBA podcast. My name's Sean and joining me as always is the one and only Dante Boffman, Mr. Boffman, man. How are you?
Shawnee, I'm good, but we're right now, you more than me, but we're reliving that dreaded childhood ritual of the last day before school goes back.
Literally, I go back to work tomorrow. You do as well, but you head off to Nepal and India, which we'll talk about in a second, on Thursday. But last day before the school holidays are over. It's been an incredible summer holidays for myself, and there is nothing I'd rather do than everything I did on this final Sunday. I feel like I jam-packed all the information and all the trips I wanted to do today, but fucking... Like, we're sitting here, we're drinking a can of no good, and tomorrow morning I'm going to have to get up at 6:30. That's not fun.
So you're commuting tomorrow?
Yeah, commuting, yeah.
I had two days in the office last week, and I, both days after 2 weeks off, was waking up like 11 minutes before I was supposed to be out the door, leaving 10 minutes after I was supposed to be out the door, and both times I still made it on time because there was no one on the roads. So I'm kind of dreading tomorrow being back to normal traffic. If you're listening to this tomorrow morning when the pod comes out, sitting
with the rest of us schmucks in the car,
sitting in bloody traffic on Lygon Street like me, give us a holler. But I was enjoying it's the little things in life sometimes, you know, that you can just cruise to the office with no traffic. But anyway,
yeah, it's going to be nice to be back in the office because I hope my employer isn't listening, but I always have the ESPN tab open. I always like to check the scores and get live updates of what's happening in basketball, and us being away. And I know you've been next to a body of water at every possible chance that you can get, but I've been doing the same. It's just like as soon as you're at the beach, you're like, cool, phone off, maybe a book out, maybe not, maybe I'm just swimming. I turn into a kid in the water, like, but
balls. We're throwing some stuff. Yeah,
I'm spinning around. I put my hand just above the water level and then slush it down really hard so the bubbles come up.
Great fun.
I'm like less than 10 years old child. But it's going to be nice to be back in the NBA groove because I've been watching games every single morning and every single time I can get a chance while I'm away. It's like, okay, well, today I'm at the beach, tomorrow I'm at the beach, tomorrow I'm doing X, Y, Z. So it's going to be nice to get back into the NBA groove of constant injecting NBA scores into my veins. But you will not be doing that because where are you going?
I'm off to Nepal on Thursday. A month there, including 2 weeks trekking in the north of Nepal right up against the Tibetan border, which will be pretty bloody gorgeous. But needless to say, I won't be in mobile phone reception range for most of the time there. And then after that, I'm over to India with my darling younger brother. We're starting in northeast India and then heading up into the mountains after that. So I will be gone for 2 months, almost to the day, which means a mid-March re-arrival back in the country and back on the podcast scene.
Well, but Dante, I can hear our listeners yelling from their cars on Lygon Street with you. What does that mean for the Deep to NBA podcast?
Well, listeners yelling from the car on Lygon Street, rest assured that we've been planning for this. We've got some San Antonio Spurs level contingency planning, passing the dynastic baton from
Kawhi
the figurative, Well, I was going to say the figurative Big Four to Kawhi, but we can say Kawhi to DeMar DeRozan if you like. We'll be getting friends of the program, Marco, Lucas, and Aless on to do their best to fill my gigantic shoes, which I'm sure they will do an admirable job of. And we'll also be potentially bringing on some other podcast luminaries from across the Basketball Forever podcast network. So what I wanted to make sure of in going on this trip is that you wouldn't be lonely. And I'm pretty confident leaving now with all of these wonderful basketball minds lined up to take my place for a period of time that you won't be lonely.
Yes, and thank you, Dante. But yes, lots of good friends, potential guests, and lots of excitement coming forwards for the Deep 2. It's going to be different. This is episode 179. The next 8 episodes, I believe, are going to be unlike the last 179 you would have listened to, but... yeah, we're going to look back on this moment fondly and go, oh, remember when Dante was in Nepal and India and Sean was just grabbing some random guest, just trying to find chemistry on the fly for the next 8 weeks. I'm excited for that. It's going to be fun.
Well, this will be the last time there was a bit of international travel for the podcast was 2019 when I went to the UK and we had the church cast. me with my headphones in, walking around the streets of Edinburgh trying to find a place that was quieter than the hostel, and settling on a little church yard with like an attached graveyard at about 8 a.m. in the morning, discussing free agency moves such as Kemba Walker and Terry Rozier doing a little swap places in Charlotte and Boston.
And if you have been listening to the podcast for that long, you'll remember that a nun ran out with her thong, said, "We don't mention Terry Rozier's name in this house." God, that was some of the
I don't know why, but you mentioning the nun has just given me a flashback to a classic episode of Magnum PI with Tom Selleck. You ever seen that?
Nah.
Maybe you will have seen the meme doing the rounds on Instagram, but he's chasing like a bad guy, and the bad guy gets dressed up as a nun and is like in a churchyard, like doing some good works, like pruning the hedges. And Tom Selleck runs past and looks at the nun, and then obviously just keeps running because he's looking for the bad guy. But then he's like, wait a second, nuns don't work on Sundays, and then shoots the nun, and then it turns out the nun was the bad guy.
Yeah, I have not seen that meme.
You seen Magnum?
No.
Oh, fuck. You know Tom Selleck?
No.
Oh, it's gone all over here.
Yeah, well, someone will get it.
Hold on, let me show you a picture of Tom Selleck. He's like who I want to be if I could choose my celebrity image. That's what I would look like. He's just got the hairy chest, thick, lustrous mustache, like, you know. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he's a hunk. He's a hunk.
Yeah, mine's that dude from Mad Men, one of the creatives.
John Hamm.
No. Oh, this is great radio. Man, creative dude.
Oh, you kind of look like him.
Every time I always forget whenever I do it. I guess just not making great radio. Just know he exists.
Oh, you're talking amongst yourselves while Sean finds the...
No, but I don't want to edit it so quickly. Let's just keep talking. Do you want to introduce our next topic?
Well, what we're going to be talking about today is the approaching onset of expansion season. And that's...
You said it so much better than I could. Sorry, Stan Rizzo.
Stan Rizzo from Mad Men.
Yeah, that's my... Not to be confused with the Riz.
He sounds like a bloody character from Sopranos. Oh, he's pretty average looking.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Let's keep talking about expansion season.
It's expansion season, and several key players across the league are now expansion eligible. And there's been a little bit of movement on the expansion front between them and their teams. Players who, in some cases, are turning down these expansion offers are set to become free agents after this season. So there's a lot riding on teams and players getting a deal done ahead of potential 2023 free agency in the middle of the year. So we're going to swing first to Indiana, where we're hearing words that Myles Turner, who has been heavily rumoured to be considering renegotiate and extend deal with Indiana. Pacers, which would allow him to make a handsome windfall and extend his contract, has turned down several extension offers from Indiana, and that one is coming from Mark Stein. And with that, we're now reverting to talking about extensions.
Yeah,
the bid has played itself out.
Well, the Mark Stein reports in the past couple of days, that's where we're getting the funny joke extension. I can hear you laughing on Lygon Street. But just he released an article talking about just everything that's going on in the NBA right now. We are less than 40 days away from the NBA trade deadline. Hold
on. I'm just going to set my
alarm.
Set my alarm for NBA trade deadline. NBA trade deadline countdown.
You will be trekking through some kind of mountain, and your phone's going to go off, and it's going to be like, the extension.
Well, actually, last time I went to Nepal and trekked was in the very end of 2018, like pretty much the same, like maybe a month earlier than what I'm going this year. And I had a premonition, an actual premonition, whilst I was there in the mountains, that the Phoenix Suns were going to trade for John Wall or Markel Fultz. And that when I got back in mobile reception range, I was going to check Bleacher Report, shout out, and there was going to be like, you know, breakdown of the Suns trading for Fultz. Like we gave up pittance to get Fultz from the Sixers, which is where he still was at the time.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like you're
going to make another prediction.
Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about it whilst I'm there. I'm going to be like no mobiles. Like my brain is going to be.
You're gonna leave on Thursday and come back, and Jay Crowder will not be on your basketball team.
Well, fucking good riddance. Isn't it about time? If you had told me at the start of the season or a week before the season that on January 8th, when we're recording this podcast, that he'd still be on the team, I would have slapped you in the face and said, stop pulling my leg.
Honestly, it is quite stupid, but that's a discussion for a different pod. But Myles Turner has turned down an extension offer, turned down multiple extension offers from the Indiana Pacers, which... I don't know what that leads me to believe. Do you reckon that means that he's not liking the money, or he doesn't want the situation? He doesn't want to be in Indiana. What does that make you think?
I would be thinking it's more the latter rather than something money based, because like
if they've upped their offer, you assume it's to what he wanted.
They're upping the offer, and they are offering this to him because they understand his defensive value primarily, and his, you know, to some extent his offensive flexibility. Although it is a bit of a bugaboo of mine when I'm watching a Pacers game, all of the opposition announcers, if I'm watching the non-Indiana stream, seem to be convinced that he's the fucking greatest 3-point shooter since sliced bread, and he's shooting pretty well from three this year, above his career average, most definitely. But he's like a pretty, underwhelming 3-point shooter for the volume that he takes and the type of shots that he takes. He's shooting 38 this year, which obviously from your 5 is really good. 35 bang on for his career. But the way that the opposition announcers are talking about him...
It's like he's taking 10.
They're like, wow, you can't leave this guy open. Anytime they're in the pick and pop, you've got to be selling out to cover that. And it's like... Most NBA teams, if you're saying that random possession X in the third quarter ends with Myles Turner taking it above the break 3 out of a pick and pop, you're like, yeah, we'll probably take it.
You're going to get the rebound.
So I think he's the money here would surely be like mid-20s. Would be talking about it as like a starting point. And Indiana knows with the cap going up, if you sign him, today, even though historically, given your centers, big money has not really worked, given your non-star centers, big money hasn't worked out for a lot of teams. Knowing that the cap is going up, if you sign him today, he's going to be undervalued in 2 seasons anyway. Yeah. So you're not going to get stung on the back end of that contract whatsoever.
Which could also be a reason why he wants to take it into free agency and wait until the cap goes up and cash out, maybe sign a 1-year deal or just cash out in free agency when he can be offered more.
I guess so, but I just think that...
Given he's not an elite centre, would you want to lock it in?
Well, the thing with the renegotiate and extend, right, is that he can renegotiate his contract for this year, which will allow him to add up to $9 million extra in salary this year that they just pay him up front. So he's earning 17 or 18 right now. So they can do the extension for the 4 years after this one with this year renegotiated. So he could get, he could sign... for 4 years, $100 million, say, after this year, and still get the $9 million extra and be making $26 million this year. That's a lot of money. That's probably not any less money than what he'd be getting on the open market. And there's a lot less risk that comes with playing the free agency game and going signing a 1-year deal and then trying to get a 4-year deal somewhere else.
I'll say that I don't think he's going to do that, but. So you can wait to free agency and splash out, but the cap space teams are like the Pistons, the Magic, the Spurs, and fuck the Pacers. But the Spurs aren't running to be like, okay, we're going to give you $5 million more than anyone else can.
But that's what makes me think that it's a situation thing for him rather than a money thing, because he's getting offered pretty reasonable money now, including a very upfront windfall.
Can I also mention something that we haven't really talked about is that. He went on someone's podcast about a month ago and said, if I'm the Lakers, I trade for me right now.
And he threw Buddy Hield in there.
And maybe we should talk about that a little bit more, and we should factor that in a little bit more because, we're sitting here saying, maybe he loves Indiana and they do good college basketball movies. I'm trying to think of what food comes from Indiana. So
I don't know, but I would not be including Indiana on my gastro tour of the United States.
Or maybe he would for the bad reasons. But it's like, okay, well, if he doesn't want to be there, he's literally said that I would like to be traded to LA, and he's been in trade rumors forever. So maybe let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say 50% of all these rumors are coming from the team, not his agent. Like, for them to have been, he's been linked with at least 5 other teams across the past couple of years. They can't all be his own team trying to sell him. There must be a little bit of him trying to get out there as well.
Yeah, I think I'd be shocked if there wasn't. And
this is the first concrete piece of evidence.
Yeah, the turning down of these extensions really speaks to that, because he's turning down money from Indiana that he'd get from another team. Like it's not like a max extension situation where Indiana can offer him 1 year extra and $40 million more than anybody else can, and he'd be crazy to even consider not taking that offer. Like the money that we're talking about here is pretty reasonable, I think, in terms of what another team might offer him. It's just that he has said that he wants to go and play in LA. A few years ago, the big team that he was linked to was Boston before the emergence of Robert Williams, and Boston was really good at the time and has gone on to make an NBA Finals, and is now the number 1 seed through halfway through this season. Well, now they don't need him, but he's kind of like, okay, I'm being linked with, over the last 2 or 3 years, like good finals teams. Teams with like Hall of Fame, like all NBA kind of caliber players on me, and I'm here in Indiana. Not for nothing. Indiana's been the surprise packet of the Eastern Conference so far, and it
must be pretty. Like, he's shooting 38%. He's playing with like arguably the best point guard he's ever played with as well. It must be.
It's not arguable. This is definitely
let's give blonde George Hill some fucking cash.
Far out. Brogdon is the only other. This is a good question. Who is a better player? This Tyrese Halliburton through halfway through the 22-23 NBA season, or the Malcolm Brogdon from the first 6 games of every season? Who's better?
I think Malcolm Brogdon for the first 6 games of the season is up there with Jonas Valanciunas through the first 2 games of the season in terms of MVP caliber. It's got to be 6-game Brogdon, but Halliburton's the best point guard he's ever played with. But let's jump forward just to a little bit down the lower parts of the run sheet here. If you're Myles Turner and you just want to win, like let's say that he wants to be in the winningest situation, he wants to play for the Clippers.
Which I'm going to interrupt you and say I don't think that's what his motivation is. But
let's say it is. Yeah. And if you hit the February trade deadline and you're the 6th seed, Indiana could well and truly finish the season dodging the play-in and be the 6th seed. They've looked good. They've got a good team. Would you want to stay here, or would you request a trade? And if you're like, I don't really know what my question is here, but actually let me rephrase it, because we can't get into his brain and see what he's thinking. If you're another team, do you trade for him?
The reason why he wants to leave isn't for a winning situation; it's for a role expansion. And he's said in the past that he wants to expand his role. And I think there's natural for there to be a little bit of frustration from him, because for so long the reason why he wasn't able to do more with the ball in his hands is because Domantas Sabonis was there. And now Sabonis has been traded away and he still hasn't really changed his role. He's still like a heavy screen setter, roll man, pick and pop big man on offense. It's natural to suspect that there might be a bit of frustration. He's like, I can do more. But the reason why he hasn't been traded and why no one has felt comfortable meeting Indiana's asking price is because no one else thinks he can do more. Because he hasn't shown flashes of being an awesome post player or being able to run a pick and roll or being able to post him up, on the block and like run cutters or have him fling a cross-court pass. Like all of the skill sets that you could say are outside the role description that he currently has. He hasn't really shown any of them. And unless he's a Jeremy Grant type operator where, he's been in the NBA system for so long and no one's seen these skills, but he definitely had them, and he moved on to a bigger team, a new team with a bigger role and blossomed, which was so notable mainly because of the fact that shit literally just never fucking happens. Yeah. Because NBA teams are so
Smart and
so ready and willing to give young players an opportunity to expand their roles and to see what they can do. That by the time you're 25 or 26, you know what you can do. What your limitations are. So no one else thinks he has this in him as well. So if I was to speculate and say like, okay, if he moves on to another team, it's not going to go well for him because there's going to be a bit of chafing there because he's going to be saying, give me the ball, let me, like I'm a potential all-star caliber center, let me work. And they're going to be saying, you just need to screen and defend, which is what he's been asked to do in Indiana anyway.
Well, in terms of the ramifications for the title of this episode, which is what it means for the 2023 trade deadline, I think because it's the Indiana Pacers and Herb Simon, the owner, want to win as much as they possibly can. They've only shown that they want to make the play and just be in something that starts with the word play. I think that even though he hasn't signed these, what must be at least 2 extension offers, I don't think that they're going to trade him at the trade deadline. I think they're willing to take it into free agency and say, well, look, Myles Turner, you're one of the reasons why we're as good on defense as we are, but we're not going to trade you just for value because we want to try and make a game that starts with play, and we think we can do that with you, Tyrese, and just a collection of guys around you. And just on top of your point talking there, he might just be Clint Capella with a J. Like, he might be Clint Capella where he's not Rudy Gobert. He doesn't set your defense. You can't put him somewhere, which you can't really do with Rudy right now, but you can't put him somewhere and just let him go off his own. You've got a top 5 defense no matter what. He might just be a good defensive player who needs better players around him to be like the hub of the defense. And that's fine. Clint Capella's going to make so many millions of dollars in his career, and it's cool that Myles Turner has a jump shot, but a little bit like Jonas Valanciunas being able to shoot threes, it doesn't unlock something more on your offense because at the end of the day, you can't play JV with Zion Williamson because they both just want to be in the paint at the end of the game. They only take a handful of threes a game. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think he's just like a supercharged role player who might think he's better than he is, but it's because of that I kind of want to see him on a different situation just to see. Like, I don't think he's going to average 25 and 5 assists. I just want to see a team out there like the Hawks with Clint Capella. I just want to see a team.
But what's that role?
It's Clint Capella, but half the time he stands behind the 3-point line.
That's his role now.
I know, but I want to see him do it on a better team.
The problem as well with his role currently is Clint Capella is a better role man than he is. And there are lots of better rim running 5s who are better at that element of the game than he is. Not for lack of physical gifts or for lack of role definition, but because he, for all intents and purposes, wants to cosplay at being a player that he's not. That if he was just playing the Clint Capella role, he'd be fucking devastating as a vertical spacer. But instead, he's spacing out to the 3-point line, and sometimes he shoots 38 from a season, and sometimes he shoots 32. And it's like the value in that is not as much for me as someone like Capella with the Hawks, where it's like, okay, well, we know that we can't step out to any of the other shooters, otherwise Trae Young is going to throw it up to this bloke for a lob. In terms of where he's going to go, he can't go to the Lakers. It just won't work from an asset standpoint, but also Anthony Davis was averaging 59 points per game for 2 weeks playing at the 5.
Yeah.
The Lakers won
It's not Lakers.
The Lakers won a championship with Anthony Davis playing in the playoffs at the 5 when they really needed it. Sinking your remaining assets and Russell Westbrook's contract into getting a guy who can play the 5 so that he can be on the bench when Anthony Davis plays the 5 in the 4th quarter would just be disastrous. And that's not somewhere where he would have the latitude to explore his role. The Clippers have been rumoured to be interested in him as well. But
wouldn't you just rather Zubac for a fraction of the contract?
Well, the Clippers are a place where I would rather Turner. Turner's a better player than Zubac, and Turner's notably a much better defensive player than Zubac, who's fine defensively, but Turner is a difference-making defensive big, whereas Zubac is just fine. But the Clippers are not going to give him the latitude to explore either, because even though there will be lots of time when the ball is not in Kawhi or PG's hands because they're not on the court. When the ball's not in those guys' hands, it's in Norm Powell's hands or Reggie Jackson's hands or John Wall's hands or Marcus Morris's hands. And you can just imagine Myles Turner like fucking trying to take someone one-on-one ISO from the post and Marcus Morris chewing him out at the next time out, being like, don't you ever do that again. So I don't know where these teams are that are like winning teams that might want him, where he would have the opportunity to like expand that role.
Yeah, and the smaller the market, the smaller amount of teams out there who are willing to bid, the bids are going to get smaller because there's less people. We've done a lot of Myles talking, and let's not do it for 10 more weeks unless he gets traded. Let's talk about the next person who declines an extension, which is Jordan Clarkson. We don't have, again, coming from Mark Stein, but we don't have any numbers when it comes to this extension, but you would assume it's in the $20 million range.
It's got to start with a 2.
Jordan Clarkson has a $14.2 million player option for next season. He is over the age of 30. He's on the wrong side of 30, some might argue, and he is playing the gunner role off the bench for the Utah Jazz, who are quite a surprise. What do you make out of Jordan Clarkson not signing? The wording here is rejecting a contract extension. I want to make that clear that the wording was rejecting, which means he might actually be on the move here, despite Utah saying they want to keep him and extend him for whatever fucking reason.
I think he can smell a trade here.
For himself or for the whole entire Utah Jazz?
For him.
Yeah.
And this is something, again, that, listeners will be familiar with me saying this about Clarkson and others, but he's the sort of player that teams come sniffing around at the trade deadline. 6 weeks out from the trade deadline, I think he can...
We need Lou Williams right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, we're 17th in bench scoring. What can we do? Let's get the guy who's 3rd in the league in bench scoring per game. Let's fucking bring that guy in. I think he can sniff something eventuating here
in Arizona potentially.
Hey, I'm not telling you what he's sniffing or not sniffing. Maybe I should say he's smelling. He's smelling. I'm not trying to get myself in hot water here.
Is there need for guard help in Phoenix, and you've got the perfect salary to throw back at a certain Jordan Clarkson? It's becoming too good. You really liked Jordan Clarkson a couple of weeks ago when your team is fully healthy and killing it in the West, but now you need a Jordan Clarkson trade yesterday just to soak up some of the shots.
Yeah, because
going to Landry Shamet.
Yeah, as you reminded me before we started the pod, Landry Shamet is the Phoenix Suns' fucking starting guard right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Booker, Payne, Paul, couple of other blokes.
I was listening to the Dunked On pod yesterday, and they were saying, hopefully when Cam Payne comes back, he can sort of right the ship. It's like, man, he's not going to fucking right the ship.
Cam Payne's been good this year, but he hasn't been campaigned from that one season where he was the best backup.
You said this last week. You said this the week before. Yeah, best backup. Yeah, cool. But can I just say this: the downfall of Chris Paul has been I didn't want it to happen like this. This is just depressing.
What do you mean you didn't want it to happen like this? You slander him at every opportunity. You have literally preyed on his downfall. You have been the single biggest hater of Chris Paul over the last 3 years that I've ever seen anyone hate anyone. And now you're sitting here playing the good guy like I didn't want to see it happen this way. He deserves so much better. I'm calling cap.
I was actually going to quickly turn around and go, who the fuck are we kidding? Absolutely fuck that freak. So thanks for noticing it. Poor Chris Paul. I mean, he suits up for these games when he gets hip soreness and has to sit for 2 weeks. But yeah, Jordan Clarkson, is he rejecting this, and is this report coming out? Has he leaked this report because he goes, the Phoenix Suns need me right now?
I think he's going to be leaning on his agent to do some pretty fucking heavy lifting over the next 6 weeks.
6 weeks? I think it needs to be sooner than that.
To work the league and find out who are the teams that are interested in me and which of them do I want to go to. And he's the sort of player where he can go anywhere. He's going to go wherever he goes, and then he'll extend with that team. Yeah, he's going to figure out, I want to be in Dallas.
There's going to be a wink under the table.
Yeah, definitely a wink under the table, and I'd be shocked if he didn't then extend with that team. Barring like a playoff collapse or whatever. Yeah. But I think the reason why he's extending this is why he's rejecting this is not a financial thing, because on the Utah side, their cap sheet is so clean right now, and they could pay him $8 million more per year on that deal, and just say, knowing that
he'll be called for again next year.
Exactly. Knowing that this is going to happen every year for the next 3 years, that he's going to be a movable asset. Like, maybe his value's at an all-time high now, but in a year's time, you'd still get a first-round pick for him, even if his contract is, even if he's getting $28 million a year. Like, he will be valuable for a few years to come. So there's no reason for Utah to play hardball with him here. So my sense is that that's coming from him, and he's kind of like on the lookout for where's next, because he knows over the next 1 to 2 years this Utah team, as currently constructed, isn't actually good enough to make the noise that it looked like they might be earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And that it is more likely that they, even if they don't blow it up, that they kind of fall back into, mediocrity.
Yeah, when you're 3-0 and no one thought you were going to win a single game the whole entire year, it's pretty fucking fun. But when you're 20-20, it's like, damn, Larry Markkinen's got to score 49 again.
20-22 and 3-7 in their last 10. So.
We've done something real silly here. Jordan Clarkson, also from a Utah asset point of view, if you can get an unprotected this year Phoenix pick, that's pretty, bless you.
Oh, thank you.
That's pretty interesting.
Especially a Phoenix team that's 20-20 and lost 8 of their last 10.
True. Especially a Phoenix team where there was a report last week that Rob Sava still has some sway in the front office for the little future that he's going to own the team. Moving forwards, there's also been a couple of negative reports about the Suns, them just saying like, we don't know who we're dealing with in the front office. Weird times in Phoenix. I would love to make a deal with a team that has a lot of fucking non-basketball things going on in the background. Next guy who rejected a contract. This is coming from Fred Leuenberg of the Toronto Sports Network. First of all, welcome, Fred. This is your first mention on the Deep 2 NBA podcast. His report was that Fred VanVleet rejected a $114 million contract extension before the start of this season. The timing of this report being released is a little bit interesting because the Toronto Raptors haven't been playing as well as they would have hoped this season. But the report wasn't really talking so much about Fred VanVleet. He declined this because he wants to get out. The report was very much like Fred VanVleet declined it because he saw Tyler Hero's money, which was 4 for $130, and he goes, I'm better than Tyler Hero. I want that money. So
he's not only better, he's way better.
There's obviously the upside play because Fred's like 29 or 30, but still. We talk about the 2023 trade deadline ramifications here. I think there are little to none unless something else moves in Toronto, which we're going to talk about in a second. But this report itself is very much like Fred VanVleet declining it because he wants more money. Again, not coming from Mark Stein. Mark Stein sort of just doing the agents favours here. It looks like the local Toronto guy is doing Fred and maybe the front office a little bit of a report here by releasing this one saying, look, we offered $114 million to a guy who was undrafted, did you know? But what do you read into this report?
Well, my first thought was like, are they offering him $114 million over 3 years? Because $114 million over 4 years comes out to $28.5 million per year. And it's not out of the question that, FVV with an all-star appearance last season almost certainly won't be an all-star this season with the way things are going in Toronto. But this is a guy who is a genuine all-star and would be on the list of the top 10 point guards in the league most likely. You're not getting him for a number that starts with a 2.
You can say yes.
You're not getting him for a number that starts with a 2. That's absolutely ludicrous. It would be feasible that he would be looking for, and they're saying that it starts at a hero level contract. Bigger than that is not out of the question for a guy who's in his prime and wants to lock in that amount of money and who has shown that he can be the starting point guard on a fucking championship team and an all-star. So I don't think that even with everything kind of going wrong in Toronto that he's going to be on the outs or that he could be traded or there'll be substantial disagreement or whatever. They'll get where they need to go with this, I think.
Speaking of the Toronto Raptors when it comes to the trade deadline, there's a report of Michael Grange from Sportsnet saying that the Toronto Raptors are considered, quote, the first domino, unquote, and that the market will be, or that they will, quote, set the market. So they're saying that the Toronto Raptors are going to be the ones who say, okay, we're trading Pascal Siakam. Who wants like this really long wing who can score? Okay, we're trading Fred VanVleet, the best point guard on the market for, since Kyrie Irving, you would say. And I'm just trying to think if they've got any bigs. No, they don't.
They got, I'm not so much interested in Siakam or FVV, but I'm interested in OG. If someone came in with a good young player and 2 first-round picks for OG, like...
I mean, so OG, we're going to talk about Kelly Oubre, and we did a little bit before the start of the podcast, but Kelly Oubre was a guy who was looked at by some of these contenders like Phoenix and like the Cavs, but like I would much rather spend just a little bit more to get OG Anunoby, who I know is going to be arguably the best perimeter defender in the whole entire planet and can just hit threes, rather than Kelly Oubre, who you're going to swing in the ball in the corner and he's going to dribble it 18 times and then all of a sudden the shot clock goes off. So I guess you are right. 2 first-round picks. There was a report that isn't in this run sheet that I can't remember who it was from, but they said that last year, at last year's trade deadline, the Toronto Raptors were not accepting any offer, and this was also at the draft. The Toronto Raptors were not accepting any offer that was less than what they would consider or what actually was a top 15 pick in the draft. That doesn't mean that there was an offer out there for the top 15 pick. It might actually argue that there wasn't. But are you going to get like 2 crappy firsts from Phoenix if you want to trade for him, like, next couple of weeks? Or
I'm just thinking that he is someone who like if a contender trades for him, like that's a fucking escalation in the arms race. I'm very, very very reluctant to use a military euphemism, but that's kind of like, how I'm conceiving of it. Like you're all battling against each other, and all of a sudden someone just fucking added OG Anunoby to their team. Like the Clippers, like you throw in Norm Powell, Terrence Mann, and 2 firsts.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if that gets it done, but all of a sudden you got the Clippers have fucking OG Anunoby on their team. Or if you're Boston, do you try and make something happen for OG Anunoby and bring him in as like the third
luxury,
the third like massive defensive stud wing that you've got on your roster, and also not for nothing, maybe a bit of Jaylen Brown insurance if you decide to move him on or he leaves in free agency or whatever. Like OG seems like gettable, because if this team was gonna like strip it all back, OG, it seems clear enough at this point that OG is not going to take the superstar jump that we've been maybe thinking that he might be able to. Like in the last 3 years, it's not been inconceivable that he'd be an all-star at some point. It seems clear that that's probably not going to happen now. So what's the point in holding on to an awesome role player?
Exactly. If you're Toronto, yeah.
So OG is probably going to be gettable if the dominoes do start to fall in Toronto. And like there's so many contenders that would just like, oh my god, like you got to deal with this guy, and then fucking OG is defending your best player for 7 games in the playoffs. Like that would be just literally a nightmare.
I mean, the Cavs would just be a wet dream if the Cavs can just replace Karis LeVert with just a dude who wants to take 5 shots in a playoff game.
The Cavs are one of the teams that like almost certainly can't, because they're so asset poor after trading for Donovan Mitchell. But like that is exactly the kind of point. Like if there's this team that has like a weakness and you just address it with fucking OG Anunoby, or like the Celtics or the Clippers like build strength on strength by bringing in this guy, like that would be crazy.
I mean, I'm speaking a little bit stupid here, but what if the Minnesota Timberwolves never traded for Rudy? They've got Cat and Vando, and then they give up half of those Rudy assets, which were good assets for fucking for OG Anunoby, just to slot inside, like in between Vando and Anthony Edwards. And also they would have Walker Kessler coming off the bench, who, if they did want to play 2 bigs, Walker Kessler looks like fine. Yeah. The white Rudy Gobert.
Yeah, the white Rudy Gobert.
Should we... Well, just first of all, let's just do a bit of take a step back and say, what impacts have you seen from the play-in tournament on these trade discussions? We've been doing this is the 4th year now of the Deep NBA podcast. Have you seen a difference in just the way you look at... Yeah, we'll take a break before that. Have you seen a difference in the way that teams are approaching the trade deadline based off the play-in? Like, can you read into it, or is it too small a sample size?
It's definitely too small of a sample size to make any definitive like long-term trend statements. But what we have seen, I think, is that exactly what the league wanted to have happen has happened, which is that teams that are like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 are kind of like, oh shit, we can maybe make a move at this. That was definitely the case last season. It's a little bit less the case this season, but I would chalk that up to there being some French kid coming through in the draft.
But we haven't really seen anyone like truly tank and blow it up yet.
Not blow it up, but like San Antonio has made a conscious decision to be non-competitive. Houston
are just bad.
Houston are bad, but they also are like, you know, like
they're playing their players who are bad at basketball.
Yeah, I think Houston's actively not trying to find a solution to the problems that they're facing. They're like, oh, we're bad at that. Oh, well, what are you going to do? I guess we'll just have to keep doing it.
Well, there was a report last week that like some in the organisation don't think Kevin Porter Jr. is a true point guard. Yeah. And they're just going to be like, damn, that sucks.
You know, like kind of like case in point, like the Thunder are like, you know, like seemingly in this limbo between being too good and wanting to be bad. And they're 13th. The Lakers are 12th. And the Lakers are charging for the postseason. The Timberwolves are 11th. And the Timberwolves are charging for the postseason. So are the Jazz, who are 10th, and the Warriors. So you've got the top 12 teams in the West that all want to make the play-in, which is exactly what, you know, Adam Silver would have been thinking about on those late nights in Brooklyn, New York. Is this going to work? Is this going to not? And then on the other side, like, realistically, like, from 11 in the East, which is the Wizards, they're 6 games behind 500, but the Wizards aren't going to tank either. So the Wizards are going to be moving forward. Realistically, there's the Raptors separated from the true tanking teams in the East. But instead of there being, you know, by 2/3 of the way through the season, there being 10 teams that are tanking, it looks like there's only going to be 5 or 6, which I think is proof of concept for what the league wants to have happen with the play-in. Now, whether that's better for these teams. And I mean, we could say particularly in the East, like we've talked a little bit about the Bulls in recent weeks blowing up. The Bulls are currently right in that mix for the play-in. But
won a couple of games. Zach LaVine hit like 11 threes or something.
Yeah, Zach LaVine had 40 points. Like, talk about it. But, you know, the Bulls, the Pacers in the East, like if they decided they wanted to pull the plug and try and like get bad, but I just don't see either of those teams doing that. Like the Bulls don't have their first round pick this year, so there's no real incentive to get bad. And the Pacers keep staving off the regression that we hear is coming. Halfway through the season now, you're 4 games above 500. Like, there's every reason to suspect you can make the play-in. And that matches their organisational philosophy. So in terms of the impact of the play-in, I think it has made teams more competitive. And at the very least, it's kind of made it like harder to tank. Yeah. That combined with the lottery odds kind of like fluctuating a little bit, or not fluctuating, but being flattened, has made it harder for teams to just say like, oh, we're going to pivot fully into the tank and be able to actually execute that strategy. So that's why you're seeing more teams that are like, you know, looking to get into that 7, 8, 9, 10 region, which previously, you know, would be very unappealing to some teams late in the season.
How fucking eloquently put. I was going to say my 2 cents, but you've summed up my 2 cents and your 2 cents. So let's take a little break and talk some news after this.
The depth, the deep 2. God, that's a mouthful. Anyways, I'm Marco, co-host of the Hey, Daniel Gafford, what's the name of our podcast?
The JVG NBA Tribute Show.
Wow, I can't believe it's that easy. Thanks, Gaff. You probably know us as 2 members of the 4-Man Weave plus Marco, but we know you as our next listener.
Well said, Lucas. I gotta ask, how do we differ from the pack of basketball podcasts?
It's a great question, Marco. You see, on our basketball podcast, we have 2 male co-hosts.
Wow, truly groundbreaking. After this episode, stay on your favourite podcasting app and give us a spin.
We have a trade to announce.
That was very well done.
The first trade of the 2022-23 season has been consummated. This report coming from Shams Charania of The Athletic. We are seeing the Celtics trade Noah Vonleh and cash considerations to the San Antonio Spurs.
And what did the San Antonio Spurs do with Noah Vonleh?
They actually traded Gorgie Zheng. But I think they waived.
They waived.
You know what? Don't fucking stump me on the first. They waived Noah Vonleh. Then they waived Gorgie Zheng to open up the roster spot, and they waived Noah Vonleh. Bang. Yeah. The San Antonio Spurs, I think they've got the most cap space in the whole entire league, so they're actually still under the salary floor.
Could the San Antonio Spurs make a play for LeBron in the off season? Find out next.
Which in turn gives you LeBron's kid. What's his name? Because he doesn't wear number 6, so I can't remember
his name either.
Like arguably one of like the founding memes of. Anyway, so there's a fucking trade that happened.
Hey, yo, bro, who that is?
I don't know. He's not wearing 6 or 23. It says James Jr. It's James Harden's kid.
It says James Jr. and like there's like 11 NBA players on the sideline like fucking cheering for him.
And all of LeBron's agents. Anyway, so Boston, by making this trade, open up another roster spot. We know that they have a roster spot given the Danilo Gallinari torn ACL, and it saves them $7.15 million in luxury tax. Noah Vonleh, despite making a lot of noise on opening night, we were all sitting around. We did a 4-man weave plus Marco after opening night, being like, how does Noah Vonleh fit in this team for the next couple of months until Robert Williams comes back? I was sitting there going, they should have signed Dwight Howard just to plug the hole. Doesn't fucking matter, does it? Because they were fine and they were the 1 seed.
And if they had signed Dwight Howard, we would have been deprived of seeing him run point in Shanghai, which he's been fucking doing.
I mean, everyone's talking about like the massive scoring explosions like Luka Doncic and Donovan Mitchell with 71, but can we just mention that in Taiwan, Dwight Howard's been putting up these numbers every night.
Dwight Howard literally is fucking taking off the dribble threes and being a pick and roll ball handler. So
so let's all pump the brakes and drug testing Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, it's all contextual.
So Noah Vonleh was usurped in the rotation by Luke Cornett and Blake Griffin. Less so Blake Griffin, but Luke Cornett's obviously got the Cornett contest. But also just a large human being who can hit threes and is getting paid the minimum.
Yeah, he's been good value for money.
This doesn't seem like the final move for the Boston Celtics because obviously they have that traded player exception that they can use that they got from the Danilo Gallinari torn ACL.
And they also have like
tradable salary.
Tradable salary, but also like movable players. Like it wouldn't be a shock to see one of Brogdon, Derek White, or Marcus Smart come up in some sort of asset package.
But at the end of the day, this is just a trade for Noah Vonleh just to open up a roster spot. This is also the 3rd trade in 2 years that the Boston Celtics have made with the San Antonio Spurs. Teams get comfortable trading with similar partners, especially when one's really good and one's really bad, and if you just need to get rid of some money.
Do you remember the other 2?
Brad Stevens can just handball a player off and just save $7.15 million in luxury tax. The other 2 trades, Josh Richardson for Derek White.
That's a good shout.
It's a correct shout. Nothing good there.
Jeez.
And the other one,
he's been doing it all day.
Was it Gorgie Zhang? Was it?
Did Gorgie Zhang come from Minnesota?
No, he signed after Atlanta. There was another one, but anyway, just like a familiar. It's just something.
Same vibe.
It's something worth noting. This is, obviously the Derek White trade was actually turned out to be a major trade, but the fact that Brad Stevens, new GM, is comfortable enough to deal with the San Antonio Spurs, just put a pin in it for the next 10 years, and then I'll tell you when I tell you. Anyway, do you want to say anything else about the Noah Vonleh trade?
No, I got nothing to say.
Cool. Next, again, coming from Mark Stein, the Lakers are going
Can we
to...
just say, Mark Stein been doing work on the Substack.
I got to subscribe to that.
Yeah.
I subscribed to it for a week because there was actually some really nice nuggets about Michael Porter Jr., pun not intended, that I used when I was working for nuglove.com. That I unsubscribed. So the Lakers are going to work out Cody Zeller and DeMarcus Cousins. The only note here I have is lol. Cody Zeller didn't play much basketball last year and he looked a bit like a stiff when he did.
He looked a bit like a Zeller.
That's good. DeMarcus Cousins actually looked pretty good last year, but the major character concerns, again, why you're bringing in a centre. Thomas Bryant's been fine. Anthony Davis is the centre.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about it. Another one from Mark Stone. Fuck, you're right. He's been doing yeomans. But double-digit teams are interested in trading for Bojan Bogdanovic, and the Detroit Pistons are seeking an unprotected first. Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report added, I think this was a little while ago, he confirmed the report saying the Cavs, Suns, Mavs, and Lakers are interested in the Croatian wing.
Yeah, we'll go with that. The Slavic wing.
And he's averaging 21 points a game on 48, 42, and 89 splits, which is fucking hot.
Pretty good.
He's having the best shooting career from all across the floor in age 32 while playing on one of the worst space teams in, let's say any team I've watched play basketball. It's a lot of the Killian Hayes, the wrong French kid. We're going to have to start calling him. But what are your thoughts on Bojan Bogdanovic? We should mention Jay Crowder. But what are your thoughts here?
Well, I mean, they're kind of two sides, like the two sides of the coin for trading for a veteran wing at the deadline, right? Because you're looking for a bit of a scoring punch with Bogdanovic, but no, you're not going to be getting much else. You are going to be getting that at an elite clip, because you just read out the numbers. That's pretty fucking that's like all-star level production. He's obviously not going to be in the all-star conversation due to a variety of factors, but like those numbers are really fucking good, and there'll be a lot of contenders saying like, oh shit, we could fucking use that. Whereas, Crowder, you're looking for positional flexibility and defense more than and you can't forget that mentality and toughness.
And all caps lock when he's tweeting.
Just boss man tings. But Bogdanovic were it not for his being 34 years old, would be someone who would command a little bit of attention. But it feels like whoever's the first to lay down an unprotected pick that's like pretty guaranteed to be 24th could get this done. I don't think there's going to be necessarily a bidding war where teams are like, no, all right, well, we want to get it done, so we're just going to add in like 2 picks. I don't think...
I mean, he is old, yeah.
He
did just sign the extension. You're paying him money.
The overwhelming likelihood is that this is the best season for the rest of his career. Like you're trying to get him...
Way to fucking put a damper on his all the good vibes he's got.
You're trying to get him this year so that he can continue this for you and into this year's playoff run. You're not like, wow, we're going to really build around this guy for 4 years. So that is going to depress his trade market. But we were doing a little bit of a.
Can I mention if you're going to go somewhere else? The Detroit Pistons acquired him for Kelly Olynyk, VanVleet in cash consideration. So if you can turn that around for, we've mentioned this 3 times now. If you can just turn around for the Suns pick this year, that's fucking you're cooking with gas. You've done a good job there, turning VanVleet and Kelly Olynyk into an unprotected Suns pick. Yeah,
I mean, looking at his his numbers right now, I've got them in front of me. We were looking at Keldon Johnson, for example, another like bigger 3-4 wing. Who's averaging 21 points and he's taking almost 18 shots per game. Bogdanovic is averaging 21 points and taking 14 shots per game. And he is not taking substantially more free throws than Keldon Johnson. They're both taking 5 a game. So he's literally just hitting his shots at an elite clip. And there's so many, like the most transferable skill, the most valuable skill for a role-playing wing. So I would definitely expect him to be gone by trade deadline, but Detroit's going to look at it and say, like, whose pick is most likely to be 20th, because those will be the picks that are kind of, like, on offer, I think. But like you said, considering what the haul was that they gave up for him, if they can turn that into, like, a decent first, like, that's some great movement from GM Troy Weaver, who has not always been the best asset manager. I think it's safe to say over the last 2 or so years.
Yeah. Cough, Marvin Bagley, cough. Let's just mention the title for this one. We don't have to talk too much about it, but Kelly Oubre Jr., who was out for 4 to 6 weeks, drew trade interest from the Cavs, Suns, and Raptors before his injury coming from Mark Stein.
Mark Stein again.
Bit of a bummer.
Wow.
He was having a good season, averaging over 20 points per game, not shooting it very well, and he's in the final year of a 2 for $26 million deal. This injury is probably, it definitely is going to take him right up to the trade deadline, so contenders might be scared off for trading for him. Something French kid, Charlotte Hornets French kid, cough. Something, cough.
What's Oubre's injury?
Hand, wrist, something.
I feel like he's had that before.
Yeah, well, he wears the wristbands, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was just a fashion thing, but I mean, maybe there's something to it.
Do you think that this will scare interest off? Or do you think
they should have been scared off by his shooting numbers, but now they're definitely scared off because if you're a contender, you want...
He still has value outside of the shooting numbers, though.
Yeah. Let's agree to disagree. Because this next piece is big news.
Assuming, if you could lay like 2 seconds and matching salary down for Oubre?
Yeah, if you can't get anything else to it.
You'd rather have that than your half of the third wings in the league.
Yeah, cool.
In theory.
That's sick.
Maybe the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you have to do something, if you're a new GM who just wants to pull the trigger, do it. If you can't get any, like if you can't get OG, if you can't get Bojan, if you can't get Jay Crowder.
Man, I'm literally salivating at the thought of OG going to a contending team. Like that would be fucking so exciting.
So the next report coming from Tim Kawakami of The Athletic, very plugged into the Warriors stuff, saying that the Warriors have made 2 contract offers to Bob Myers and he has not signed either of them. Joe Lacob went on when speaking to Tim Kawakami about how much he loves Bob Myers and how much he's the best GM and how much blah, 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 he loves him and wants to bring him back. But he did say that the 2 couldn't come to a financial agreement yet. He's confident that he'll do it. Quote here, which, I could have read out any old quote which goes, we love Bob, he's one of the best GMs ever, he needs to be financially compensated, we trust ourselves to do it. But the quote that I found very interesting was, quote, there are circumstances that do evolve sometimes. I guess it's conceivable there's some chance that for some reason he or Steve Kerr wouldn't be there.
Steve Kerr 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, alright, 2.1.
Continue quote, after being interrupted. I don't think it's likely, but it is possible. If so, we'd have to figure out how to go forwards. This is the first time, obviously, Joe Lacob, a free agent, he could sign with any team that he wants, and he'll be getting paid arguably the most, or what he might be getting paid the most out of any GM in the whole entire league. But this is the first time we've heard anything about Steve Kerr not wanting to be the head coach.
Do you think that that's what that is, or do you think that that's Joe Lacob just saying, I'm a manager and I have to be prepared for any eventuality, and just instead of saying that in a boardroom meeting, he's saying that where someone's got a microphone?
In a vacuum, yes, he's just saying it where someone's got a microphone. But just remember the Kenny Atkinson stuff, where Kenny Atkinson signed with the Charlotte Hornets and agreed to be the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, and then he quickly turned around, and then there was like a tiny little whisper on Twitter where it's like, why would he do that? What's Steve Kerr doing? Steve Kerr has never said that he wants to be a coach forever and ever and ever. He's accomplished everything he could ever want to do. Why would Kenny Atkinson, a guy who's just been promoted to the lead assistant role with the Golden State Warriors, who has done a great job and won a title, is
well, I'm going to interrupt you again. The answer to that is a bird in the hand is better than 2 in the bush.
But what if there's a plan where he could eventually become the head coach?
What if there's not? And Steve Kerr is going to be the head coach of the Golden State Warriors for as long as Steve Kerr wants, and Kenny Atkinson doesn't want to potentially spend 2 to 8 years on the lead assistant role, and decided that he wanted to go and coach fucking LaMelo Ball.
No, but he didn't. He turned around.
I know, but the zeitgeisty Twitter response, looking for why would he do that? Like, that's a mistake. Like, no, like,
but exactly right.
It's not a mistake.
As soon as you say, no, well, yeah, what a stupid call to make. But it's just the second time you've heard it, and I'm being cautious here. I get it from Dante's mother. It's just the second.
Keep my mother's name out of your mouth.
It's just the second time. The second time I've heard this, where it's just like, why is Steve Kerr mentioned here? Why the fuck would he want to go? He might be the winningest coach of all time when it's all said and done.
I just think this is contextual and is maybe being removed from the context. I don't think there's actually. Okay. I would be shocked if there was any.
It's just the Kenny Atkinson stuff was really weird.
Steve Kerr would surely not be
rushing to leave,
retiring, or leaving, or stepping away until all of Steph, Clay, and Dre are no longer on the team. And Steph is what, 33, 34, 35. Fine, yeah, he's getting up there.
Well,
what's Jay? 31, 32?
35. No, he's 33.
Okay. So these guys got like minimum 2 more years. So I don't think that there's realistically a scenario where Steve Kerr is imminently leaving. But that's burying the lead on this news item, because the news item is about Bob Myers, who, who's looking for a new contract and has turned this down for ostensibly financial reasons. Because it feels kind of fucking crazy to say what I'm about to say for a guy that's been the GM architect of 4 championship teams and like the greatest dynasty that we've seen since the Jordan Bulls. But this era of Warriors basketball, this 2-window situation and the success that's already happened, with last season's championship, with the old guard and the new guard, if this is a successful period, like this could cement him as one of the best GMs of all time. Like I'm really
like Jerry Krause.
Seriously, like
great teams.
This is a guy who not only built an incredible team, but then also handed it over to the next generation for sustained success. So he definitely wants to be here to see that through. It's got to just be financially based, and looking at what he makes a year on his current contract, he's making $8 million US per year, which there's not widely available data on what all the other GMs are making, but that sounds like a fucking bit compared to who's the Magic GM? Is Rob Hennigan still the Magic GM?
Yeah, he's
not making $8 million a year.
No, but who's the new? What's Tim Connolly on? Was it like 2 for 15?
Tim Connolly,
who was poached.
Yeah, Tim Connolly is a little bit. I feel like a little bit out there because he was poached from like an elite situation, and the only reason why he went is because they had to fucking pay through the nose for him. But
also Denver cheaped out.
James Jones, he's the architect of a
finals team.
Of a finals team and a 1 seed over 2 seasons, and he's recently been fully promoted to like the executive, the Pobo, the fucking executive. Like he's not the GM, he's the fucking whatever imaginary titles you want after that. That gets you up the organization chart. Crazy to imagine that he'd be on anything approaching 8 mil. Like what are the coaches on? Like the coaches are on like 3 or 4. Obviously Bob Myers is, like we've said, the architect of fucking the greatest dynasty of the last 25 years. But still, like 8 million is already a lot. So you wonder what the financial difference is here, especially on the back of Joe Lacob kind of having to make the financial decision to let Otto Porter Jr. and Gary Payton III go. Otto Porter Jr., who still can't get back on the court for Toronto, which is looking like a major... I mean,
neither's Gary Payton.
Well, but at least Gary Payton's injuries weren't like fucking very predictable.
He played a basketball game, didn't he?
Yeah. Weird, like not weird, but like relevant that the narrative around the Warriors has been like the luxury tax payments to keep this team together are like potentially crippling. And now, Joe Lacob is kind of saying to Bob Myers, there has to be a limit on what I can spend on you as well, even though in theory there's no limit, because if he wanted to give him $30 million a year, there's no rules to say that he couldn't.
Yeah. Gary Payton second, 7 points, 4 assists, 2 steals, 1-on-1 from 3.
Isn't that the bloody most GP2 line ever?
So hot. I miss him so much. The other day, I put it in the group, and you guys all ignored me because I was just jerking over the Warriors for a while. But remember when he dunked on Goga Bitadze? And like just absolutely
noted rim protector,
but he just fucked it on his head. And Gary Payton, he actually has a signature dunk celebration where like he looks up at the guy, tilts his head like a dog, and then just scratches his head. Like, you just let me do that.
Yeah.
And then Goga came up and headbutted him and got kicked out. Oh, so cool.
These Turkish bigs, they've got a bit of a mean streak in them.
Who's the guy in Houston?
Şengün.
Oh, he's got the fattest ass, man.
Yeah, he does. But Şengün also like low key, like white guys can jump. Şengün's had a few like posters. Shit, like you jumped from where?
But it looks so shit.
Nah, they look good. There was one where he was rumbling and rolling
against Zach Collins.
And in Zach Collins, that was fucking awesome. That was so
Zach
good.
Collins, noted shot blocker rim protector. Fucker. All right, final piece of news just to wrap it up. Coming again from Shams Charania of The Athletic, that Shaedon Sharpe has committed to the dunk contest.
I love a man who can commit.
Awesome. I mean, we're just going to wrap up with a question where it's like, can you just list me a few names of guys you want to see commit in your fantasy world to the dunk contest? Shaedon Sharpe's probably up there, but if you had asked me this before I saw any names, I would say, yeah, Shaedon Sharpe. But just list off a couple of names that you would want to see commit to the dunk contest, whether realistic or unrealistic.
Well, I mean, we've been saying this every year for the last few years, but wouldn't it be crazy if we could get like a Zach LaVine, Aaron Gordon reprisal?
I was going to say that in a very cringe way. Yeah, that would be cool.
Man, that'd be kind of awesome. Both of those guys are definitely giving post-dunk contest phase of their career vibes.
But also, like, Aaron Gordon still, like, you haven't really seen like a Zach LaVine crazy dunk in a while. Aaron Gordon had the one over Shamet. Aaron Gordon's been fucking dunking.
Zach LaVine's been injured and coming back from knee surgery, so that's potentially why.
Aaron Gordon's spinning top tattoo behind his ear. Pretty cool for a dude who dunks like he does.
Okay,
cool.
I'm not sure what to make of that comment at all, but I'm just going to continue listing some guys who
list some guys.
Ed Edwards would be heaps of fun.
Demetrius Morant.
Demetrius Morant is like in the unattainable sphere of like he would never do it. But he would be he might be the best in-game dunker like in the league, and he's 6'1".
Yeah,
so I think that might actually straight up be true.
That's what about a return for Juan Toscano Anderson?
I think that's doing more for some members of the Deep NBA podcast than for others.
What about Terrence Ross with his half Vince Carter jersey?
Nah, Terrence Ross is done. What about Cole Anthony comes back wearing the fucking Timberlands again?
I actually hate that. I actually dislike that so much. What about Jeremy Evans coming out of retirement?
Only if his dunk is only if his first dunk is at the other end of the court. Ronnie Turiaf shoots a mid-range jumper and he blocks him and runs the length of the court and then slams it. That was that highlight when Jeremy Evans was on the Jazz and Ronnie Turiaf was on the Clippers was the first like etched into my brain NBA highlight from like 2011 era. That's like I can literally I'm just thinking about it right now. Just whilst we're talking about awesome in-game dunks, you know what is so fucking underrated that we talked about? I think with regards to the Gordon dunk on Shamet a few weeks ago, not only because of the in-game dunk, but also because it was a game winner. Yeah. But DeMar, like 4 or 5 seasons ago,
over Anthony
Tolliver when he was on Detroit for the win, where he grabs a rebound, goes coast to coast, and then just inside the free throw line and just like literally baptizes this guy.
Yeah.
And I am not affiliated with the Catholic Church or Christianity in any way. I don't even really condone baptism, but if you're baptizing on 94 feet of hardwood, I give you permission. I give you permission.
It just doesn't sound real. Anyway. Any final names for the dunk contest?
No final names, but just to wrap up, you know, that's all for me for a little while. So, listeners, you'll be having to get used to the dulcet tones of Aless, Lucas, Marco, and some other mystery guests. Sad to... I was about to say something nice to you, like... now, after being interrupted. But it'll be another 2 months before we sit here with a microphone in between us and chat about basketball. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm wishing you all the best in holding down the fort in my absence. And I know that you'll be more than capable.
Well, Dante, from everyone here at the Deep NBA podcast, we wish you the best of luck for your trips ahead. We're all extremely jealous because, well, it's been a great 2 weeks for me sitting on beaches, just reading Sink and Pierce. It's going to be a fucking even better 2 months for you, just hiking through fucking mountains, doing whatever the fuck you do when you're over there, drinking chai tea at every
fantasizing about what point guard the Phoenix Suns are going to trade for.
Well, a lot's changed, but not a lot has changed because you're doing the same thing, aren't you? You need to plan for after Chris Paul. But yeah, best of luck fucking disconnecting to reconnect and etc. Say hi to Louis when you're over there.
Will do. And thank you for those well wishes, and I'll see you on the other side.
I'll talk to you in episode 187.
Mate, I'll put in the diary.
We were over the moon when we first heard that the NBA was going to be televised on Australian free-to-air TV in the 2019-20 season. It didn't exactly go swimmingly with the nasty cough halting the season and games getting cancelled left, right and centre, but it was a huge step and an exciting one for basketball fans all across the country.
Better yet, it wasn't a commercial channel cashing in on some basketball nerds like us. It was SBS, one of our public broadcasters. Unfortunately, the NBA wasn't the only thing SBS was pushing last season. They also ran advertisements from Sportsbet, Ladbrokes, Bet365, BetEasy, and Neds, some of the biggest sports betting companies in Australia.
In a one step forwards, 2 steps backwards move, SBS has dropped the ball here. As a public broadcaster, SBS plays a key role in providing relevant, culturally appropriate health information to local communities. The last thing SBS should be doing is offering a platform for gambling companies during the most financially unstable time in recent memory.
This past year, men aged 18 to 24 made up 79% of new gambling account holders, with increased median spending and frequency of bets. This is the last thing we should be spending our money on given the financial uncertainty that comes with the pandemic. During COVID lockdowns, wagering companies spent more money on advertising and incentives to gamble, and it worked. SBS needs to hear from viewers that gambling ad revenue isn't worth the harm it causes. Call on the SBS chair, George Savitas, to put community health ahead of gambling revenue by signing the petition at www.endgamblingads.org.au/get gambling off SBS with hyphens